The Assad regime in Syria, backed by Russia, has fallen. That was the big news yesterday, late in the afternoon. I considered covering it when it was breaking news, but I'm very glad that I didn't, because to be completely honest with you guys, I don't know, or I should say I didn't know, a whole lot about Syria and the state of affairs there. I was very aware of the entire conflict that went down with the Kurdish genocide, like the Kurdish people getting genocided. I've heard about how like there are certain presences of like terrorist groups and whatnot, but not a whole lot. And so I figured I'll wait until tomorrow. I'll let some more reputable news outlets cover the big breaking news, get the videos and the statements all gathered together, and I'll spend the night and next morning doing some research about the state of affairs in Syria. And oh boy, this is a massive L for Putin. You see, Bashar al-Assad, I believe I pronounced his name right, was the president of Syria. And he was backed by Russia. He was basically propped up by Russia. And while Trump and the US and even Biden have mostly wanted to keep their hands kind of clean of any involvement with what's going on there, there's been a 13-year-long civil war going on in Syria. Now, the rebel groups that have been revolting against the Russian-backed government have changed names, faces, leadership, associations quite a lot. But through that time, up until recently, to be clear, while the rebel group has been a lesser evil than the Assad regime, I would not necessarily call these rebel groups good. They are the good guys here, at least as far as I can tell based on the research I've been doing, but they are not necessarily flatly good. Now, there have been some conflicting reports about the associations of these rebel groups. It's a confederacy of rebel groups. But the thing is, it's so many different people, so many different parties and organizations in Syria that have been opposed to the Assad regime for a variety of reasons and for a long time. More recently, the amount of support that the civil war has escalated to the point where apparently about a week ago is when Aleppo was taken by these rebels, and apparently they moved all the way up north, or all the way down south to Damascus, where the capital is, and had absolutely no resistance. Apparently they didn't have to fire any rounds. There were no civilians or even like government forces stopping them, because apparently even the government-backed forces and law enforcement and military were not willing to stand behind the Assad regime once the rebels started rolling in. And so the people welcomed them, more or less. The military didn't try to stop them. The police didn't try to stop them. Apparently the police and military abandoned their tanks and uniforms to let the rebels through. There was just no desire to resist against this overthrow. And it just goes to show how little support and popularity there was for the Assad regime, that he couldn't even use like force in order to like quell this rebellion. And you can tell that lately there's been such a drop in support that they were now just able to stroll in. They couldn't have done this 10 years ago. They couldn't have done this 5 years ago. This is a more recent development that this has been possible. And the world is quite stunned right now at these developments. But hey, like I said before, this is a massive L for Putin as well. This kind of ties back to the discussion we're going to have a little later in the stream about Ukraine. I do plan to do a Ukraine segment later. And yeah, this is a pretty big L for Putin to take. A kind of a silver lining to all of the really bad news we've been getting lately. Unfortunately, a lot of that bad news has been to the benefit of Putin and the Russian oligarchy. So here, I'm accepting the good news when I see it. I have reservations, that's for sure. I'm hoping the new leadership is a significant improvement upon the old leadership. That's my hope. So yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at the more recent news. Apparently, this is a video that shows rebels escorting Syria's prime minister out of office. as the Assad regime falls. This is basically going over like the developments of the last 2 days as the country starts to build up a new government.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Good morning, I'm Victor Blackwell.
Good to be with you. I'm Amara Walker. There's major breaking news in Syria as we are coming to air this morning. A lightning-fast rebel offensive ending 50 years of authoritarian rule in Syria. Just overnight, rebel forces say Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad fled Damascus as they took control of the capital, and he has not been seen since this morning.
Yeah, he's gone. Assad just dipped. He just dipped out. He left. He recognized that Damascus was going to fall. It was going to be captured, and that he needed to bug out. And so he did. I don't even know if we've gotten news as to where he is. Him and his family are in Moscow now? Thank you, Jarek Mitchell. You were on top of that. God damn. So yeah, they fled to Russia. Of course. They fled to Russia. Honestly, that would have been my guess had I not immediately gotten an answer from chat. Yep. So at least we know where they are now.
You hear it there. The news met with celebration across Syria and beyond. The gunfire there in celebration is...
Mind you, this conflict and the rule of Assad has been the reason for a substantial amount of the Syrian migrant crisis. The refugee crisis, I should say. The refugees. I think it's Spain and Turkey and Greece, correct me if I'm wrong, have taken in the majority of Syrian refugees, along with Italy has too. I think the U.S. has as well taken in a lot as well, also. But there's been a massive refugee crisis due to the instability and the turmoil that has been going down for the last 13 years in Syria. And hopefully now that can start to wind down. People can be like, oh, we don't need to flee our country. Like, obviously, I think you should take in refugees. Obviously, I'm not against like taking in refugees, but ideally the circumstances that create refugees wouldn't be happening in the first place, right? Like that's I think this is a step towards a slightly better world. At least I hope. Maybe I'm being optimistic, but we've taken a lot of steps back in the last month or so, and I'm a little bit eager to see a step forward.
Rebel supporters cheered in the streets, and they tore down monuments to the Assad family. We have new video in this morning. It shows rebels escorting Syria's prime minister reportedly to a hotel to officially hand over government authority. Shortly before that, the prime minister released this message. He said he was ready to work with new leadership.
We are ready to cooperate with any leadership the people choose, offering all possible support to ensure a smooth and systematic transition of government functions.
Do you think the Confederation of Rebel Groups will hold an election? Like a fully legitimate democratic election to decide who will be the new president? Or do you think they won't even have a president? Like, I don't even know what sort of government they might go for. The reason Assad fled to Russia was because all the other Muslim countries were ready to turn him into the rebels? Yeah. Yeah. To be fair, there's been a lot of accusations of these rebel groups working with radical Islam groups, like radical Islam terror groups. Though I do think that there, more recently, has been tenuous connections. So let's hope nothing crazy ends up going down.
Serving state facilities.
The prime minister said this happened very quickly, with rebels sweeping through the country since launching the offensive last week. And they claim to have captured 4 cities in a single day before reaching Damascus. And now the rebels are questioning Syrian military officers and others trying to find Bashar al-Assad. Rebels are questioning in a single day.
For reference, about 6 days ago, Aleppo fell. And then they rode south. I'm pretty sure they went through these 3 cities. No resistance. Worked their way down south. They probably didn't go through these mountains. They probably went around. And then they made it to Damascus, the capital. And it fell They captured Aleppo, traveled all the way to Damascus, and captured it in 6 days. It's fucking crazy, dude. That's crazy shit.
Day before reaching Damascus. And now the rebels are questioning Syrian military officers and others trying to find Bashar al-Assad. Even they made it here, you can see, inside his palace. We begin our team coverage with CNN Chief International.
The rebels were trained by NATO and the Arab League? Okay, so pretty legit training, but they didn't need it. There was no resistance. Like Aleppo, I don't know how much resistance there was in Aleppo. I haven't dug super deep into that, but I know that getting to Damascus, there was very little. Well, really none.
National anchor Christian Amanpour, who is live in Doha. Christian, to you, with this rapid advance and overthrow, as we welcome in a new audience at the top of the hour, just set the context for us, what this means for the Syrian people, for the larger region, and, you know, some of those questions that we'll have to wait to get answers to.
Indeed, Victor. So the Turkish foreign minister has just finished a press conference in which he said, "We woke up this morning to a totally new Syria. The Assad regime has fallen. It's over." This wasn't just 50 years of dictatorial rule. It was one family rule that had a lock on Syria for the last 5 decades. And this all spiraled and started back in 2011, about 13 years ago, along with the Arab Spring, when the Syrians, young Syrians in the town of Deraa tried to, protest the Assad government. They weren't even calling him to be overthrown by that. And they just wanted democracy, freedom, the kind of things young people want. The Assad regime reacted very strongly and brutally, and that's what's launched this 13-year civil war. Now, I asked the foreign minister, where is Assad? Is he in the country? And this is what he said.
We now know he's in Russia.
Okay, apparently you don't have that. Apparently you don't have the soundbite, but
even CNN, it can't find these sound bites and clips at a moment's notice because of how shit Google is now. It's even CNN is getting hit with the effect of the absolutely demolished internet infrastructure that we used to love and make such great use out of and learn so much from.
What he actually said was, I can't comment. And then under pressing from me, he said, I think he's probably now out of the country. So that is what they think. Now, Turkey is a big backer of the anti-Assad forces. Since the beginning, Turkey has been essentially with the anti-Assad forces. Now, while they're not officially taking a massive, victory lap, they're clearly not unhappy about the resolution of this crisis. The question is, who are these new leaders?
The Assad family was put in power by the USSR to counterbalance Saddam Hussein that the US put in power. Yep. Yeah, I read Wikipedia. I knew that.
Who is al-Jawlani? Is he a Democrat? He used to be aligned with Al-Qaeda. He then said they're branched off. He's trying to portray himself as somebody who can do what the Turks are calling for now, which is a national unity government, a government that respects the minorities, for instance, the Alawite minority, which supported the Assad regime.
What exactly did she mean by young people wanting democracy? 50 years ago, or like over a decade ago, when this civil war broke out, it was due to young people wanting democracy at a very high rate. This is always how it goes. Like, the youngest generations tend to be the highest rated as having like radical progressive beliefs, and it tends to eventually boil over to the point where something like this happens. Yeah. 13 years ago, the young people of Syria were pretty fed up. 13 years later, the even more young people of Syria are extra fed up, and that's how something like this goes down.
That keeps the territorial integrity of Syria. So that's for that. Now, the big picture in the region is that Iran and Russia were...
Our young people are going to the right. Young men are going to the right. Young women are going even more radically to the left. That pattern will probably continue to happen until we figure out whatever the root is of the animosity that men and women are having towards each other in younger generations.
the main Assad backers. The minute they
I actually have a study I'm going to be doing a segment on a little later that talks about how scientifically they have proven that Republicans treat women with less charitability, and will see a perceived moral wrongdoing as more severe from a woman than a man. But conversely, Democrats have the same reaction to men, where presumed innocence is more common among Democrats when a statement is made about a woman, and presumed guilt is immediately assumed when it's about a man from Democrats. So the science does actually show, based on the study we're going to be covering later, that Republicans do hate women and Democrats do hate men. That's really interesting. Yep. And I think that's probably a big part of why these two lines are diverging so heavily, where young men are like veering off into radical conservative, young women are veering off into more radical progressivism. It's because men and like progressive women are always more likely to be progressive, men were always more likely to be conservative, but now that's being sort of lit aflame and made worse by this gender war shit and this like political bias. So men are feeling broadly like they're oppressed by the left, and women obviously feel oppressed by the right, and so it's just continuing to drive a wedge.
They saw Aleppo and the others falling over the last week, they pulled back their support. Iran has been moving its troops and its foot soldiers on the ground out of Syria, and the Russians are saying we no longer support Assad, but the Russians are still there because they have a warm water port on the Mediterranean there. So now, all these regional governments, the regional nations, and including the United States, are trying to figure out what is the best way forward for Syria. It's clearly a changed situation, with Iran weakened after the Israeli attacks, with Iran weakened after the degradation of Hezbollah, with Russia weakened because of the war in Ukraine, and none of these big
I don't like the guy who's firing his AK at like at a obtuse angle to the ground. I'm not big on that. You're supposed to fire it straight up if you're gonna do that, because if you hit an angle like that, it's just you're arcing a bullet at a a terminal velocity, that's for sure, off into the distance to hit God knows who or what. But if you shoot it straight up into the air, that's the thing. It has to be straight up into the air. It's not going to kill anyone on the way down, because it has to go up, lose momentum, and then fall down. And, falling will not get a bullet like going fast enough to really hurt someone when it falls. So I don't like the guy here who's shooting off into the distance like that, unless there's just a mountain off to the side we can't see here. But this guy shooting almost straight up in the air is doing it mostly right. He doesn't want to get bopped on the head? Maybe. But I don't want anyone else to get bopped in the head way worse.
With Russia weakened because of the war in Ukraine, and none of these big backers who for 13 years had invested in Assad against the people of Syria, none of these backers are willing to go out on a limb for him. So it's a new...
One of those shitty fucking European... Or actually, no, I think these are really popular in like Asian countries, from like the Philippines to China, Japan. These little trucks are really popular, and they're really shitty apparently. I hear about these a lot from friends I have that live internationally, and apparently these little trucks are super shitty. I guess they've got them in Syria. I love those. Yeah, in Japan they're everywhere. I hear they're shit. I hear these little trucks are shit.
Are willing to go out on a limb.
I guess they're good for this, though.
So it's a new day in Syria, and we're not sure how it's going to turn out, but we're certainly going to keep watching.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainty, Christian. And if you can talk to us a little bit more about the opposition rebels led by this group HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And in terms of, again, a lot of uncertainty, but how much of this is it being seen as a positive development, given that this rebel group has ties to ISIS and al-Qaeda? I mean, it seems like there is a bit of unease because it's relatively an unknown group.
Well, I think that is the million-dollar question. You're absolutely right, Amara. Nobody quite knows how this is going to, proceed. Jaulani, who is the head of this group, gave an interview to our own Jomana Karache when they were still in Aleppo. So that was days ago, before they stormed all the way up and to Damascus, taking cities rather, that, as the Turkish foreign minister, without barely a bullet being fired, like a hot knife through butter, all the way to the capital, and then it was over because the backers did not stand behind Assad in the end. The sort of slogan of the day by everybody, whether it's the United States, whether Qatar, whether Turkey, is that it's Assad's fault. They're all saying he had a chance while this civil war was sort of on a calm boil, relatively speaking, since 2016, to create and answer the needs of the people and the demands of the people, to create national unity, to make sure that there was an actual functioning government. And the Turk said he never did it. The Qatari Prime Minister also said to me he never did it. He lost the opportunity to still be in charge of Syria, and that's been coming for several years. In terms of who this group is, I think the Turks probably know the groups the best. They're also saying
I think they're
that
destroying
this is going
a
to
statue
open up
here.
the possibility of all the Syrian refugees who've gone to
I think that's Bashar al-Assad's dad, if I'm not mistaken. A statue of his dad that they're breaking. Let me know if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that's who the statue is of that they're breaking with like mallets. Yeah, I figured.
Turkey, and their millions who've gone
I forget
to
what his
Jordan,
dad's name is, though. His
all
first
sorts
name.
of places, and been held in camps for the last many years. 13 years these Syrians have been held in these camps. I mean, they're for their own sort of safety, but nonetheless they can't move out, they can't work necessarily properly, and now
Hafez al-Assad? Okay, I think it was him. I think it's a statue of him that they're breaking there.
they'll be allowed to go back, he hopes. Again, I'm sorry, we're going to have to wait and see. You're right, Jaulani was allied with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. He then said, as he was preparing, you could see now in retrospect, preparing to take the reins, kept saying, well, we've broken with Al-Qaeda. We're a different group. We've changed the name of our group. They denounce ISIS as well. The United States, even President-elect Trump said, we don't have a dog in this fight. We're not getting involved in their civil war. But
of course,
we will, and certainly the current administration in the U.S. saying if ISIS tries to take advantage, they will do what they've done in the past, which is presumably use airstrikes or the rest against ISIS. We'll wait to see. One thing, very interestingly, the Turkish foreign minister put the U.S. on notice that their Kurdish and other anti-Assad groups, who they have relied on for the last...
Dude, this is such a big week for Dylan Burns. Holy shit. This is crazy. I love that they're looting his palaces, like, lol, like, hell yeah, get it, Lamau? Yeah, go ahead and melt all that gold down into like, for the Federal Reserve of Syria or whatever. Who cares? Make it Syria's money now. It belongs to the people. That's their treasure.
13 or so years will not be tolerated. Any Kurdish group that...
Xanderhall, also the rebels are anti-Iran because Iran helped back Assad back in 2016. That's actually a really good point. I was wondering earlier as well if this unexpected change is going to... this might be a massive game changer in regards to, like, stability and terror throughout the Middle East. And of course, when it comes to, like, keeping our enemies and our adversaries in check, right? Like, Iran now has another country to worry about. That's not necessarily on our side. Like, we don't know if this rebel regime is going to be on our side, but they're not going to be pro-Iran. And that benefits us. That benefits, well, most of the Western world, really.
That has any links to the PKK, which is the Kurdish group that the Turks call terrorists, will not be tolerated, and the Turkish government, of course, will not work with them. So, one of the big questions I have to say, and the United States has not successfully or convincingly answered this, nor has anybody in this region, how did this happen with apparently nobody being prepared for it? As surprised as we are, so are all these other countries, which begs the question of leadership from all from all quarters, as this region is in turmoil ever since, and especially since October 7th of a year ago.
Yeah, and we, of course, are getting the first glimpse of the U.S. Philosophy, at least from the president-elect, Donald Trump, who says that the U.S. should not get involved.
I love how, like, nobody cares about what Biden's response is going to be. Like, we've yet to mention Biden. We've mentioned Trump twice, and he's not president yet. I get it, but also, like, we have a currently sitting president, right? Who's not Trump. Just a reminder.
This is not the U.S.'s fight. We're going to go to our correspondent in Washington in a moment to hear what President Biden's administration believes about what is changing there in Syria. But for now, Kristen.
Yeah, at the end, we'll get to Biden, but for now, we want to hear what Trump thinks of all this. Yeah, we got to hear Trump's take. Trump's got a very valuable opinion on all of this, I'm sure. Though to be fair, it does matter because, he's going to be president, but I genuinely don't think Trump could point to Iran on a map. I don't think he could. I don't think he could point to Iran and be like, yeah, those are the guys that we're dealing with. They're a problem. There it is. That's Iran. I don't think he could. How are we going to deal with Iran when he can't point to it on a map? Trump's the God King, though. Don't you remember? True. I forgot. Trump is the God King. How could I question him? Of course. Thank you for reminding me. I appreciate that. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed this segment, if you found it entertaining, educational, or enjoyable, then please consider leaving a like or thumbs up whenever or however you're watching the stream. Whether you're watching this when it goes out as its own segment on YouTube or watching live, consider leaving a thumbs up. It really does help a lot, as do comments as well. In fact, comment down below what long-term effects on the state of world peace this overthrowing of the Assad regime is going to have. I imagine most of you are as optimistic as I, but I'd be curious to see if anyone has any reservations or concerns and hear what they are. So comment them down below. The comments also help the channel immensely. And of course, subscribe and ring the bell icon if you haven't already so that YouTube actually tells you when I go live or upload new videos, because if you don't, of course, they will not. And if you want to see more from me on other platforms, be sure not to forget to follow me on my social medias, linked down below in the description, especially including my Blue Sky and my Discord server, as those are the main hub and pillars of my fan base and community. And if you don't want to miss anything, you definitely want to go there. I also, tonight, will be hosting a watch party in my Discord server in the Xander's Theater section. So if you guys want to watch some Walking Dead with me and the rest of the group, then consider hopping in. It's open to everybody who's in the Discord, so I highly recommend you consider joining. Link in the description. And finally, if you want to support me directly, financially, help me keep the lights on, a roof above my head here at the Xander Hall studio, then consider donating, subscribing, gifting a sub on my website, xanderhall.com/live, or supporting me financially through YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, Stream Elements, Patreon, or buying merch through the Streamlabs link down below in the description. But with all that said, regardless of how you support me, thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a good one.